Are we on? Are we really on? Yeah.
Nice fade.
And and the podcast will begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's up, Mark? What's going on?
How you doing? That's the script. There it is.
Thanks for being here.
Now we're going to solve the world's problems.
Yes, we're going to solve the
here.
world. Oh my God! First, thank you very much for being here.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it. Saw your social media presence, and I was like,
You're the guy.
"You're the guy."
You're the guy
You're
that
the
saw it.
Yeah, a stalker. No, but it's really very, very. How do I say it? Very exciting to have a drummer in the studio. Not that I haven't had a lot of drummers in the studio. I mean, I'm kind of biased toward drummers.
You're a drummer.
I'm a drummer.
Right. How many? So you don't have drummers typically?
Well, I don't know.
Are we that boring? That
No.
We're an
I
interesting breed, aren't we?
I think drummers are very exciting to have in the studio. But you specifically, because not only are you a drummer, you're also a producer.
I've been known to produce.
There you go. So let's start from the beginning. When I say from the beginning, what made you play the drums?
Oh, man. Well, I started very early. My parents used to go to dances a lot. They still do, actually. And, I was a little guy.
Where is home? Is it California?
Home is Michigan.
Michigan.
Home was Michigan.
Oh, wow.
I grew up just outside of Detroit. And my dad, big Polish family.
Yeah.
He was born and raised in Poland and came to the States in the early 60s.
So you're first generation.
Yeah, I am.
Like my kids.
So I'd like to say he came over on the boat,
Yeah.
but he flew.
So fresh off the Boeing.
Yeah, exactly. He flew in and looking for, bigger and better opportunities.
Right.
And of course, Detroit's auto industry, was booming back then, still is. Set up shop in the suburbs of Detroit. And, my sister came along and then I came along and they liked going to dances and, they had to drag us kids along. Didn't have to, but
when you
they
say
did.
dances, like ballroom dancing, kind of.
Polish family, so it was it was polkas.
Yeah, polkas,
and,
yeah.
It's very
my God.
celebratory and happy music.
Yes, all the time. Yeah.
Ironically, I'm playing dark wave and electronic.
Polka would be like
evil
2/4.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, the story is that they like dancing and, having their 3-year-old child sitting at the table by himself was, not really a good option in that environment. So I ended up, I don't know if they brought me to that position or if I gravitated towards it, but I was positioned behind the band while they were out dancing. And I had full view of,
everybody,
the drummer
and everybody else.
The drummer was what I was like, look at what's going on here. Like this guy is controlling
everything.
The beat. Yeah. I was just entranced by it. And to me, the way it felt and what was going on the dance floor all came from this person sitting at these
Wait,
drums.
You were 3?
I was 3 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, and you go to enough of those things. It was like all summer long.
Wow.
It was parish, festivals and things of that nature. And eventually these guys would turn around and see me, keeping the beat on my lap, and I still can remember vividly the first time the guy turned around and gave me a pair of drumsticks at the end of the night, and I was just like. I was running around with these drumsticks, just like showing everybody that, I got drumsticks. And then, of course, I go home and I'm beating the hell out of everything around the house. And just to keep the pots and pans and furniture intact, I was given a drum set, probably like the Toys R Us piece of crap,
so
paper heads and...
How, okay, I grew up in the Philippines. And in the Philippines... there were houses, but if you lived in the city, you're in an apartment. In Detroit, growing up, were you in a house?
We were in a house. We were in the about probably a good 30 minutes outside of the city.
Okay.
And outside of the city of Detroit is farmland for miles.
Right.
So I
So
grew up in
you can make
rural-
noise. Okay, rural Detroit.
Yeah, I was surrounded by cornfields and soybean fields and cows and chickens and a long way from LA. That's for damn
Okay.
sure. Yeah. So, but we didn't, and basements are very popular in the Midwest, but we didn't have a basement. We had just a ranch style house. So my bedroom was where my drums were.
Where your drums
and
were.
my poor dad, he worked in the factories.
Yeah.
He worked building cars, building transmissions for
Noisy
GM
already.
and waking up at 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, whatever, going to work all day and then coming home and listening to me beat the hell out of these drums. I wouldn't wish that on any parent, but they let me do that because they saw that I was interested.
Nice.
And hats off to them for that, because not a lot of parents want their kids to
And
be
they were
drummers.
so exactly right. So your parents were very encouraging.
They were and encouraging. I'm the only musician in the family tree that I know of. So they're scratching their heads. I mean, they liked music obviously because they were dancing and doing the whole thing. And Sunday mornings, there'd be records being played, before church, and it could be anything from Polish music to. I remember there was a lot of ABBA being played,
So,
and it was disco
the
grooves,
calypso,
and it was just awesome.
Dancing
because
Queen.
it's like, why did Dad play so much ABBA? But now I'm just like closet ABBA fan, not so much closet anymore, obviously, but loved that stuff because all of it had the common denominator of groove. There was danceable beats happening, and I loved being a part of that. So I would literally just play my drums along to these cassettes, these records. The kit that I got when I was 3 years old quickly got demolished because I'm playing, I'm beating the hell out of these paper heads, and they're, the sticks are going right through them. So I think I got another kit when I was 5, and it was like a step up, but not quite anything to write home about. I remember
You never stopped, huh? 3 onwards.
No, I remember there was a time between the second and third drum kit. It felt like when you're a kid, everything feels like eternity, right? And I remember there was a very long period of time where I didn't have a drum kit because I beat the hell out of these 2 Toys R Us style kits. And then my parents were like, okay, for whatever reason, there was just no drum kit. And I was just like, I would be on the corner of my bed and I'd set up the pillows, the round pillows in a certain way. And I'd crank up the boom box, and I'm just like doing the thing. And I remember I looked over one day, and my dad was peeking in the door and seeing this, and he's like, oh God, okay.
No formal lessons yet at this time.
Not at that point, no, but I was asking. I knew from age 3 to at that time it was probably like 7, 8 years old. I had been just playing along with the cassettes and records, and my sister being a little older, she was bringing home like the pop music of the day.
There you go. Was this in the 80s?
This was in the 80s. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Duran Duran kind of.
How did you know? Is it the hair? Is it the eyeliner? I don't know.
Like Duran Duran, we talk.
I am such a Duranny.
Me too.
Oh, man.
Me too.
I'm still huge.
Roger Taylor. That's why my first.
Roger was my first big idol, man.
I still have my Tama kit because of Roger Taylor.
The Tama kit came later.
Okay.
I had to foot some of the bill for that. And that was a good lesson to be learned. But no, somewhere, between there was that time where I didn't have a drum kit, and I was asking him, like, there's a right way to do this.
Right.
And I want to know what it is. So, I was asking for lessons, and I was probably 7, 8 years old. And for my 9th birthday, my dad comes in, with the bass drum. It was great. I'll never forget it. I'm sitting at the table, the cake's there, and I'm like, cool, and my dad comes in beating this drum. I'm like, a drum kit. And it was I remember the brand was TKO Percussion. TKO. And I don't know if that still is a thing, but man, was that thing just, it was a step up. I'll say that.
Definitely from the Toys R Us, right?
And it was a kick, snare, 1 rack tom, 1 floor tom, very Ringo.
Full size?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was black.
Oh,
just like Rogers.
Yes, just like Rogers. Yeah.
And I was just on cloud 9. Had 1 crash cymbal mounted on the kick drum, And I asked. You know, we got me some lessons at Ray's Music in Monroe, Michigan.
Shout out! Are they still around?
No, heck no, no.
Shoot.
That place had dust on the equipment like back then.
Wow!
You know, so I don't know how they survived, but I went and took lessons from a guy named I think his name was Gary Griffith.
Okay.
Who I've since tried to track down, but with no luck. Because that teacher was probably, I mean, my first and last private instructor had the most influence on me. That guy, you know, he taught me how to read. Really? And taught me the rudiments and all the stuff. And I remember spending a long time on the snare drum. I'm sitting at this drum kit in this lesson room, you know, and he's like, no, we're on the snare drum. We're on the snare drum for a long time. And that's how I treat my students now, too. It's like, don't look at the other stuff. We're dealing with that centerpiece right there. It's the snare drum. And I remember just, you know, being, you know, I was impatient, just like now. I'm you know, I want everything now. But I was just like, okay, this is what we're doing. And I just remember him saying, day one, it's like, all right, right, left. Just start out nice and slow. And, you know, keep that up for 5-10 minutes. I'm like, really?
On a metronome? Not yet.
Not a metronome yet. That came a little later. But he just wanted me to slowly increase the tempo. And that's why a lot of my playing is based off that double stroke. I do more double strokes than any other drummer I see on a drum kit. And that kind of, you know, I do the floor tom on the left, and I'm very, I call it circular, you know, and I use a lot of doubles and paradiddles and
your fails by guys. I'm gonna post links in the description so you can watch Mark's drum videos. They're very, very awesome and they're very, very impressive. I'm very impressed. Very impressed. Okay, so Durrani face. This is the 80s.
Yeah.
Did you have a band back then?
Well, you know, I was still teetering on the okay, I gotta play these polkas for Dad. You know, I can sit in, then it became I was sitting in with these bands that my parents were still going to the same dances. All the same parish festivals were going on. And now you're
looking forward to
kid,
exactly.
They seemed like they were just like rock and roll concerts, you know. People went nuts for the stuff, and there was a big following. There was a big, like, you know, St. Charles Festival, St. Patrick's Festival, Saint, you know, whatever. Every saint had a festival, and it was a thing. And eventually, I started, you know, I was the token, you know, like kid sitting in with the band. And I was the hit of the night because, like, who is this little, you know, 9-10-year-old kid that's going up there and rocking out on these polkas?
Imagine this was the 80s, no?
This was the 80s.
Pope John Paul was Pope.
And I went to see Pope John Paul at the Pontiac Silverdome. He had one of the biggest, I think it was probably record-setting, like, mass. Like, this place was giant. It's where the Lions played and, you know, football. And we went to Pope John Paul's mass.
I got to see him, but he was this small. He visited the Philippines, like this small. But
Polish Pope, I mean, it was a big thing. So I kept up on the polkas. I was sitting in with these bands, but then when I'd be stealing my sister's cassettes of Duran, and I'd be playing. I remember for show and tell in second grade, I brought in the Duran Duran Arena album.
Oh my God!
Because I had just got it for my birthday or Christmas or whatever.
Please tell me now.
And I'm just like in front of the class giving this presentation on who the guys in the band were, and everybody's looking at me like I was a weird kid, man. Like, you know, I was into
every musician is a weird kid.
Yes.
Right?
We are a community of strange.
Yes. My God. So this went on. And this went on all the way to high school. You were known as the drummer in high school.
That's been my identity for my entire existence is Mark the drummer, you know. And in the 80s it was an interesting time to grow up because the video revolution was happening.
MTV was happening.
I lived in such a rural area that I didn't get cable, but I had friends that had cable, so I would go over to their house and like watch these videos, and I'm like, what planet are these people from? Like, you know, Talking Heads and Duran and
Talk.
Oh man, Mark just passed away.
Yes.
Mark Hollis
I know,
just passed
right?
away recently. and Flock of Seagulls, like
The
all this
psychedelic
stuff,
first.
all that stuff, and I just loved this world that they created by way of video.
The new romantics,
the new romantic scene, even the the hair metal stuff was big. Rat, and all the stuff that my parents didn't want me to check out. It was forbidden, and that just made it more interesting. To be honest. And but the video stuff was just like, it kind of ruined me a little bit.
You know what's so nice when you say video, and going to a friend's house to watch music videos. Like in the Philippines, we had to rent VHS and Betamax tapes. Remember that?
We
Mike?
did that too, yeah.
Like MTV would be there pirated and you'd watch everything.
Well, it being that we didn't have MTV at the house, the big thing was like, Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve, and I would have the VCR. We got a VCR in 1980, whatever the hell. And I would just record everything that I, dug, and interviews with the bands, and that's, American Bandstand and, Casey Kasem's top, whatever Sunday afternoon.
American Top 40.
All that stuff made a huge impact on me. And I remember talking about VHS tapes. My dad brought home the Sing Blue Silver documentary of Duran touring the States for the first mega tour.
Yes, I remember
Coca-Cola was the
I remember
sponsor.
where Roger Taylor would show his finger, his blisters.
The blisters all over. I memorized that I watched that video so much, and that's what I mean by it kind of ruined me, because it set the standard really high for what I'm like, I see these guys on stage and in these videos, and good-looking British cats, dressed, in really peculiar but awesome, Anthony Price suits that were very flamboyant, but and they've got the makeup and they've got the hair, but they also had the girls, top shelf, like supermodel women are, and the people come
androgynous
to the shows.
looking, but they had the girls.
And I saw, once again, my sister being older, she'd have her friends over and they'd all be watching I'm like looking at the reaction of the ladies, and I'm like, this is what I want to do with my life. This is it. So at a very young age, I had very, very big aspirations for.
What was your fashion?
Well, you know what? I admired it, but I didn't know how to dress yet.
Wow. Okay.
I had no idea until way later, and we'll get to that.
It's so weird because
I didn't know where to get those clothes.
Me too,
like, where the hell do you come up with this?
So
stuff?
the Philippines is a humid country. It's like Miami, but times 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
There's a humidity, but I would wear a trench coat. You too?
Like Spandau Ballet at Live Aid. Like, why are you wearing that in this weather? But it's so cool.
Yes, like I would wear a scarf, and my dad would be like, really?
Oh, Dad was really scratching his head. I'm like into Prince, and he's like, oh man, what kind of kid are we raising here?
Oh my God! Like I was into John Keeble of Spandau Ballet and Roger Taylor.
Oh man, we were speaking the same language here. This is fun. I like this.
Nice. Yeah. And then where does U2 come in? Or did it even come into your life?
U2, the band? U2? Oh, gosh, yeah. Larry Mullen Jr. has the best posture at the drum kit of all drummers.
Yes. And now he has a back press, by the way.
He's got the back. You get a little tired, but...
Is that why you have the floor tom on the left? It had nothing to do with Larry Mullen?
The floor tom on the left has to do with Neil Peart.
Okay.
Yeah, and that came later. That came Roll the Bones era, 1991.
Really? So Roll the Bones before Moving Pictures, huh?
Well, he didn't do the left floor tom until that album.
No, but when you got into Rush, was it?
I got into Rush
during Roll the Bones already.
If my sister does eventually see and hear this, she's going to be really pleased with all the props that I've given her, because she was in high school and she, I think she was on the Pom Pom Squad or whatever, close to the guys and girls in the band.
Right.
And her friends would come over, and when this one gentleman in particular, he was a trombone player. He saw that I had a drum kit, and all her friends would come over. They're like, "I'll play drums," and I'd play, and they'd be like, "Holy shit, this kid's good," And this trombone player, he's like, "You ever hear the band Rush?" I'm like, "No, I've never heard of them." And he's like, "You might want to check out this drummer." And the next time he comes over, he hands me this cassette, and he's like, "You can borrow this. I want it back.
There you go.
can borrow this, but it's queued up. So pop it in on side A and check this out. Just hit play and listen." And it was queued up to the drum solo of YYZ.
There you go.
On Exit Stage Left.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And I was so dumbfounded that anything can be done like that.
Wow.
Like Neil...
Yes.
And God bless him. He just
know.
passed away recently, and I'm crushed. I'm still in kind of denial and just kind of,
Me too.
you know, we'll get to that too. But I was pretty hooked, and I remember for the next, you know, I think I was probably in 6th or 7th grade at that point, and I remember going to the music store, the record store, and like, okay, there's a Rush record that I don't have. And every time I would go to the record store, there'd be a new, like, I didn't know their history.
They had a lot. Yeah,
you
yeah.
had no internet. You had
Yes,
no way
yes,
of,
yes.
like, who are these guys? And every record that I kept on buying was from a different time period in their career. So,
Yeah.
like, is this the same band? I bought Hold Your Fire, and then I bought, like, the Fly By Night album. And I'm like, what the hell is
It's like
going
night and
on?
day, yeah.
So, but I was infatuated, and I had to collect. I was just collecting them all.
Were you
And
able to do that?
I sat there, and as I went into my high school years, I spent most of my high school years learning every single Rush song.
Wow.
And which meant that I had to buy
Yeah.
a lot of gear to be able to pull this stuff off.
Let me ask you, because my first exposure to Rush was moving pictures. And I was so in awe. Like, let's start with Tom Sawyer and all that stuff. It was my first exposure to Odd Time.
Odd Time.
Remember, coming from Duran Duran, coming from Modern English,
I know.
coming
I
from
know.
U2, all of a sudden I'm now listening to this. My bandmates, unfortunately for me, I was in a band that wasn't capable of going that direction.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
But my question to you, and I'm intrigued because I couldn't shadow play Neil Peart just because I don't know the parts by heart because I never really went deep into it. But when you were practicing it, how were you able to dissect that?
Man, very carefully. I mean, as far as I remember the first time, so I had that Exit Stage Left cassette. So there was a lot of stuff from a lot of different records. It was a live album. And then my sister's boyfriend gave me, he's like, here's Grace Under Pressure. I got this from like whatever, and I don't want it. So I'm listening to it, and I'm listening to a song called Kid Gloves, and I'm like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3. I'm like, what are they doing here? This is not, common time.
Yes.
This is not 4/4.
Yes.
And I was a little confused, but intrigued. And that was the first song that I sat down and played on the drum kit to understand what was going on. I don't know if I was counting it out or just feeling my way through.
Yeah, I wanna know, just because there are people, if this is a drum conversation, I'm pretty sure there are drummers wanting to find out what's the quickest way to dissect that.
Well, I just listened over and over. There was a lot of starting and stopping of the cassette.
Yeah, like, of course, without going into deep talk, there are time permutations, and when you modulate a time, right? It's like putting a triplet onto a 4/4 thing, or putting a 4/4 beat into a 6/8 feel. That's kind of confusing already to a lot of drummers. They might count it differently and all that.
Well, yeah, we can get into like subdividing.
Exactly. But when you were starting, talk to the newbies.
Yeah.
What should they do in terms of dissecting Odd Time?
I took the long way around.
Okay.
I didn't, I wasn't, even though I had been taking lessons since age 9, I didn't consider myself a strong reader. And even through high school, being in marching band and jazz band and orchestral band, any band that I could get into, I still, it was a small town, which meant the school was very small. And, there wasn't, it was a small band, so we could get away with a lot,
Right.
So my reading chops weren't that great. And, I was playing these songs along with records, so I was just by feel and by ear And it wasn't till like I wasn't even counting these things out. I just would hear these odd time signatures and figure it out some way, somehow. And I would do things wrong, and the band's, you know, in my ears, like already to the next measure. I'm like, okay, I screwed that up. So let's go back and figure out where this thing ends. And that was really the long way around, because later on, when I started understanding time signatures better and understanding, you know, just what's going on musically, and I think eventually I did get a Rush, you know, the book that charted out Neil's drum parts. I was like, holy crap, that's
was that
what
the
I'm
plus
playing?
one?
I think, yeah, I still have that book, and it's got the, you know,
the CD.
Yeah. And really kind of took the long way around, but I managed, and it was more difficult getting the gear to be able to do.
Okay, yeah.
Because I wanted to make it authentic, so I needed the 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14,
Wait,
16.
so you really went all the way for
I
that?
had the orchestra bells to be able to play.
Yeah, the mallets.
Yeah, the spirited radio, and you know, I had to have all that stuff. Temple blocks, the cowbells in the same spot. Everything, chime trees everywhere, and it was just.
What did your dad say? Were you still at home?
I was in high school, and for
in your room.
Well, we moved to a different house my freshman year, thank God, because we got this big basement. And,
now with a basement,
it was so great because I had more space.
Wait! What made you think the basement was yours? Yo, you just assumed.
When we were shopping for houses, that was kind of we need to get this kid in the basement. Okay. And it just made sense. So that was high on the priority list of what we were. So the
drums went to the basement.
Drums went to the basement, and of course, my dad's bar that he built was on the other side there. So we shared the basement.
Yeah.
But yeah, I spent a lot of time down there. I was just a prog rock dork in high school.
So from New Romantics,
synth pop to prog rock, playing all the Rush stuff, all the Yes stuff, and then Dream Theater eventually came along and was so mathematical and that made my head spin.
Bill Bruford, Mike Portnoy's
Images and Words album.
Pull Me Under.
I heard that on the radio of all places.
Right? Oh.
They only played it like twice on the radio, and I was one of the people that heard it one day. I was like, who is this band? And so, I didn't get laid a lot in high school, but I sure learned a lot of Rush songs.
I was gonna ask you because if it's very like
I had the mullet. I was just I had no style whatsoever. I was roughed up in school a lot because I was the band nerd, and I had a rough go. But I had a different life outside. Here, going back to your comment about like you couldn't find the caliber of musicians in your age group to do what you were capable of doing. So once again, my sister's boyfriend was a DJ, and he brought me to school dances, and there was a band playing the cool high school band kids, in the rock band. And so he was DJing, and then they played a set of music.
Wait, what year? In the early 90s?
But yeah, this was probably 90s.
Okay, so early 90s would be late 80s, early 90s, that would be Bon Jovi.
Yeah, there was some of that stuff going on. I mean, I can't. The band that was playing that night, they were covering like AC/DC.
AC/DC. Okay, so hard rock.
Yeah,
okay.
Hard rock.
Typical classic hard rock.
And somehow, some way, I ended up sitting in. And so that kind of got me into the older kids crowd, and I started playing with the 18-year-olds when I was like in 8th grade.
Okay,
and then that turned into when I was in high school. I started playing guys that were like 24, 28, like well out of college.
Right.
They probably didn't go to college, let's be honest. And, they were the long hair, they were playing Motley Crue stuff. And I had my first studio experience at age 14.
This is so revealing in a way, because you started out pop, but Rush actually took you on a different trajectory, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like from New Romantics, if prog rock did not come into the picture, you'd probably be playing behind the Backstreet Boys or
maybe. And right? I would take that gig today.
Me too. But as a drummer, I mean that was a nice trajectory, right?
It was a really dramatic turn.
Of course.
You know,
because from there and then you go back, but you never went pop. You went classic rock.
Yeah, I liked classic rock. I liked Journey, and I liked a lot of different stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked the pop. You know, everything that was coming from England, I loved.
Me too.
But I also loved a lot of the rock stuff that was
Yes.
happening in the States, and then. Yeah, I got into Rush for. I mean, it was probably a good solid 3 years of just like I didn't listen to anything other than Rush because it took me.
Yeah,
there was a lot of material there.
Exactly,
and I made it like a goal to learn. Like, at the time, I think it was 147 Rush songs that I knew. You know, looking back, I don't know that I'd love to hear a recording of like how I pulled it off. Maybe I wasn't as good as I thought. Who knows? But I was, you know. Whatever it was.
I mean, even half of
it was training.
Even a quarter of who Neil Peart is good enough for any other drummer.
Right, and I learned a lot from a composition standpoint of like not only how to remember parts in a 20-minute song like Hemispheres or 2112 in its entirety or these long pieces where it really taught me how to take a drum part. You know, aside from the complex, you know, time signature stuff, even taking the simplest things like calling back to a drum fill that happened in the first verse, but now it's in the second verse, and you just subdivide it a little differently on the drum kit. That's what I got from Neil. It was the subtleties of like how to tell a story in your drum part.
Yes.
And like the throwback to a fill that happened earlier in the song, but playing it slightly different. The rhythm is the same, but you're playing it on different. Like instead of a splash cymbal, it would be on a china to make it bigger.
Like what he does on Spirit of Radio, the sticking.
Yeah,
is pretty
That's
much
a great example because it's less complex, but it's still a longer piece.
Yeah,
and it takes you all different kind of places, but. There's a lot of that in that song where, you know, that's reminiscent of that drum fill that he did earlier, but, you know.
Different voicings
on the kit. And I paid attention to those nuances and it really taught me it's just not about, you know, you can play a part like a Charlie Watts, you know, Rolling Stone song and be fine, but there's this intellectual side of like really maybe nobody's noticing this stuff, but I do.
But you know what's so nice with your story? Your first teacher made you focus on the snare. Mm-hmm. Don't look at the other pieces.
Yeah, and eventually we got to it. But,
right.
But it was so important to get the technique and the reading stuff. And honestly, like, you know, okay, fast forward like 3 or 4 kind of useless instructors in there. And then I met a guy named Steve Whitford in Monroe, Michigan that taught me about the hands and using these back 3 fingers to
for the bounce.
Oh man, balance point.
Yes,
and
fulcrum.
Things like that I still use in my teaching today, and that I still, you know, my warm ups are, you know, just straight 16th notes, one handed, and then second handed. It just all of that's based on that sticking technique.
Who taught Neil Peart and Steve Smith?
The traditional phase that he went through?
Right? I mean,
that was Freddie Gruber.
Freddie Gruber.
Yeah.
Where in everything...
Some say that he ruined Neil, but...
Where everything should be ergonomically...
and then he had the waterfall toms and stuff.
This is natural.
I remember that tour. I remember seeing them. I was front row for that tour. I think it might have been Roll the Bones or maybe Counterparts, somewhere along the lines of early 90s when he was doing that. And, you know... I admire anybody that can play for that long of time and be considered one of the best drummers on the planet and say, you know what, I need to go back to school.
Right.
And expand. Like, I've been doing this.
And actually be successful changing it and still pulling everything off.
Right.
And all that. Okay.
And there was certain things that I was just like, and he eventually
went
right back to his comfort zone. But, you know, I'm sure that, and you hear it in his interviews about that. And he also took lessons from Peter Erskine, which is a lesser known fact. But, you know, and that's the thing. Like when I moved to LA, I took lessons again.
Okay, let's talk.
That's really fast forwarding.
But before we come to LA, you were in the Midwest.
Yeah.
I was in the Philippines. You were like 3,000 miles away from LA. I was 7,000 miles away from LA.
Yeah.
What was it like setting up your Neil Peart replica in the basement? What was going on through Mark Damian's mind in terms of, I'm going to conquer the world? Or did it ever occur to you? Or was it just, nope, this is it, just the basement?
No, I like I said earlier, I had aspirations from age probably 8 or 9. That
what were those aspirations?
Well, I wanted to be as big as possible. I wanted to tour the world. I wanted to see stuff. I wanted people to be interested in my playing and my musical contribution. It was never, I want fame and fortune, but I wanted to be big.
Right.
You know, I wanted that lifestyle. And I loved everything about music.
Now, did you sit your mom
wrong or right?
Right? Did you sit your mom and dad down and say, listen,
when I started playing with the guys, when I was in 8th grade going into high school, and I'm playing with guys that were in their 20s,
okay.
They got a little worried. Because these guys were like, hey, we've got this gig at this bar in downtown Detroit. And, you know, this was a time where, and I can't imagine that this is legal today, but I remember getting a work permit from school to be able to go into bars and play.
Dennis Chambers did that with his mom.
Dennis Chambers is even older than me, right?
So when he was a young kid.
That was possible. I don't know. Today's world is a little different.
Bruno Mars did that, by the way, in Hawaii.
Okay, so it's possible, still, you know, he's a young cat. So it's still possible then.
But you got a work permit, huh?
I got a work permit to work in establishments that I had no business being in as a 14, 15-year-old kid.
So after the gig, you had to leave? Or you had to go back to the green room?
You know,
you can't hang out with where there is alcohol?
And honestly, my recollection of playing those bars, they were pretty empty. It was a cool experience because it was like, hey, I'm playing bars, but we didn't have any draw, you know. We were just starting out, you know, even though these guys were in their 20s. Maybe they had some friends come in, but we weren't playing to packed houses by any means.
But your mom and dad sat you down.
Oh, they were probably freaking out.
What was the conversation like?
You know, I think the conversation happened more between them and the musicians that wanted, you know, me to play with them at these places. I was just like, what's the big deal? I want to do this. This is my thing. I'm not going to get into any trouble. You know?
Now, was college even on your mind?
Yes.
Did you finish college?
No.
It was just on your mind.
I going back to this rural area of Michigan that I was in a small high school. And, you know, your junior year is when they start, you know, your counselors start talking to you about your future.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, crap. You know, I just want to be a rock star.
Did you say that?
Well, I mean, to myself. But, you know, to go the right route, I was like, yeah, I want a career in music. So how do I do that?
Okay.
And they're like teaching? Or I'm like, no. That's where you go when you fail. That's terrible. But I wanted a career in music, and I didn't, you know, a lot of them just thought, okay, well, you go to Eastern Michigan or you go to, you know, somewhere around here and you get a degree, you know.
So no one said L.A., huh?
They, you know, I had L.A. on the mind for a while, you know. I knew what L.A. was all about. At least I thought I did.
So when you were talking about this,
no idea.
When you had this on your mind, junior high or whatever, you were dating.
I was.
You were dating somebody, no girl involved.
Oh, in high school, I had girlfriends.
Would you tell them that, you know, this is?
Yeah. I'm out of here the second I get a chance. My plan so when the counselors started talking to me about this, they wanted me to go to university and study, you know, orchestral. I'm like, no. I want, you know, modern, you know, stuff. And then I heard of this school called Berklee College of Music in Boston. So I'm like, that's where I want to go. And they're like, okay, so they, you know, of course, pre-internet, they're, you know, sending away for pamphlets and stuff. And they got all the information, and I brought it home to my parents, and God bless them, they're looking at the amount of money that it costs to go there, number one, and they're like, oh, okay, well, let's do this.
Nice.
Yeah, but you know what? It scared the hell out of me. I was even being on stage as a young 9, 10-year-old, doing the thing all the way through high school, playing these bars, playing these things, I was still a pretty shy, timid cat. I liked being behind my drum kit, hiding back there. And still to this day, I feel like nobody can possibly be paying attention to me back here. So I'm okay. And that's how I get through it, because I have terrible anxiety issues.
Whatever.
Yeah. And but I was afraid, being from small town. I mean, small town to the point where I remember when we got our first traffic light in town. Right. It was a big deal. This is rural, Michigan, and I got cold feet, and I'm like, I stalled it. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll do 2 years at community college and then go to Berkeley, because I was worried about my reading ability or lack thereof. And amongst other, going to a big city like Boston, going to a prestigious music school.
Who was going to get the loan? Your parents were going to get the loan, or you were going to get the loan?
My parents were good with their money, and they probably
saved up.
They stacked it up, and eventually my college money went to buy a second house on the lake somewhere,
God bless you.
So it all worked out in the end. But yeah, I was very afraid. I got really cold feet about going to the big city and going to a prestigious school like Berkeley, and I felt inadequate because I knew I was a big deal in a small town. I was the guy in town that I played well, for my age, and I was playing with older cats, and then by my senior year. I discovered a whole okay, so we went from Duran to Prog Rock, Rush, and then I discovered Pink Floyd.
Classic
and
rock.
My world changed. Well, specifically,
so that's
Pink
where it
Floyd.
got dark.
Well, that's where it got dark, because I started paying attention to lyrics.
Yeah.
And I started paying attention to concept records.
Yes.
And Roger Waters and his angst and darkness and probably dabbled in some mind-altering,
LSDs,
things that, some of us do at that age. And I decided, and this might have been my way of justifying not going to Berkeley. I didn't want to conform to such I didn't want to go that route. I wanted to be a creative now.
Yeah.
And part of that was true, and part of that was me freaking out about, going to the big
Your
city.
anxiety again.
Yeah. So I got a full ride music scholarship to Monroe Community College, and the plan was to get an associate's there and move on to Berkeley. And I got 6 months into that school, and I was just, I ended up at the bar playing darts and drinking beer instead of going to class, because I chalk it up to, instead of going somewhere, I probably should have just sucked it up and went to some school. Eastern Michigan really wanted me. And their professors were coming and seeing my last few concerts at my high school, and they really, the phone was ringing constantly to go to Eastern Michigan, and they told me what my itinerary would be, like all the music classes and all the regular curriculum, and I'm like, when the hell do I have time to do anything? That was not appealing to me at all. And so I opted for the small community college, and I felt like I wasn't learning anything, and I got really bored really quick. It was like high school all over again. Right. I didn't have a very good experience in high school, and this was just a slight level up. The professors weren't, titillating to me.
So it wasn't really about the challenge. It was about the presentation of the curriculum.
Yeah. Right? I was excited to take things like psychology, and I'm like, the psychology class was so not what I wanted at all. She's like, everybody take a chapter and do a presentation. She didn't teach the class once. She had a person, you got chapter 1, you do a presentation on it. And there's like 30 chapters in the book. So that's
the lazy thing.
It was terrible.
Oh,
it was terrible. God. So I felt it was really easy to justify bowing out of that. So I scrapped that, and then I started just getting hired for gigs.
And that's what you did.
Yeah, and I started I was gigging.
Like real money.
Oh man, $100 gigs, $150 gigs. I'm doing it.
Free drinks.
I wasn't that much of a drinker back then, but it it certainly felt good getting compensated to have fun and play on stage. And I was playing rooms and people were coming out, and I'm like, this is cool. I'm doing it.
And this was building your confidence also.
It was building my confidence, and I started teaching around that time too.
Okay.
My instructor, my private drum instructor, Stephen Whitford, he was great. I had told him about a high school friend of mine that wanted to take drum lessons.
Right.
And I said, I'm going to refer you. And he's like, why don't you teach him? I'm like, I didn't even think of that. Like, really? He's like, yeah. You teach him.
That's
actually
nice.
It was a female. You teach her. So I started teaching a little bit in high school, and then by the time I was in my early 20s, I was like, I had a handful of students, and that is when I started getting really good at reading.
Yeah,
because
of course.
now when you're teaching this stuff, you're forced to be able. You have to explain it.
Yeah,
you just can't glaze over this stuff and play off a feel.
And sometimes
anymore.
they'll bring Like, I remember bringing a modern drummer transcription to my teacher going, can you read this for me? Mm-hmm. And I was very nice to actually say, can you read this for me? Other kids would say, can you play this for me?
Right.
And if your teacher can't play it, it's like, huh.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's some interesting stuff in those drummers.
Yes. Okay, so now you're the hot shot playing gigs. Were you in a permanent band, or were you sessioning?
I had a band. Going back, I had my first studio experience my freshman year.
Studio meaning recording a demo, recording an album.
We were recording an album.
Wow. Okay.
And I show up. I'm 14 years old, and there's a drum kit there for me, which was awkward. I always like playing my own gear, as we do, And I remember the engineer being like, "This is your drummer." 14-year-old kid walking in. This ought to be interesting. And they fire up this thing called a click track. And I was like, okay.
Let's talk.
Let's throw the headphones on, and that's what I'm listening to. Now, this was the first exposure I got to the stacking of tracks. Like, there was no, I'm the first guy in.
Yes.
And I'm playing the drums to, I don't even know if we had a scratch. Oh, the bass player played along with me to give me reference of where I'm at in the song.
Right.
And there was a click. So I had to follow this click. And
now, Steve never introduced you to the click?
We played along with metronomes and stuff. But, this was different. This was like, pressure changes everything.
Yes.
So whether it's a couple hundred or a couple thousand people in the audience or the red recording light going on, that's a different scene. You can play in your basement, you can play in front of your friends, you can play, I had live experience, but playing in the studio, when that record light goes on,
time is money. Yeah.
It's different. Time is money too. People are looking at their watch. And for some reason, maybe ignorance was bliss. I don't know. I just handled it just fine. I went in, I put the headphones on, and I started to play along with this click, and I got through the take, and I walked back into the control room, and the engineer's like, oh, yeah, okay, next song. So, and I attribute that to all those years as a kid playing along with those records.
Yes.
A lot of those 80s records,
they're all metronome.
They're spot on because a lot of them were electronic.
The Lindrums, baby.
They were, aside from Duran was real drums. But when I was playing along with Prince records, of course, that was programmed stuff.
Oh, yeah.
When I was playing along with Depeche Mode, that was programmed stuff. So it kind of ingrained this ability to keep good time to a machine.
Yes.
Anyway,
there
was no push and pull. I learned that way later. But yeah, so we did this record. Fast forward, that band broke up. I was pretty devastated by the whole thing because I thought we were on our way.
No. And this was still in Michigan.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't move to LA until way later. I was way tardy to the party.
But
coming out.
But
here.
why the hold up? I mean,
well, I'll glaze over this a little bit. But I was 16 and I really enjoyed the studio process. So I wanted to make a solo record.
Wow.
Because I started playing other instruments too along the way. I started picking up bass. I started, playing keyboards a little bit. And that first studio experience, I loved, the cool thing about being the first guy in and having to track your part first.
Right.
You're just a fly on the wall for the rest of the process. Yeah. So I would just sit right next to the engineer and I'm like, okay, how do you make drums that sound like this in this room sound like the final product? Yeah. And I was just, the audio bug bit me from that point on too. I wanted to know how these faders and these knobs worked and how you got the sounds, out of it.
Do you remember the mixing desk that was being used?
Well, I don't remember the desk, but it was tape. It was like, it was crappy tape. It was probably quarter. No, it was hissy nastiness. And I still have those recordings, and it's hilarious because it's like press play and it's like, hissy nightmare. But the drums were triggered, and so they sounded okay. But yeah, it was tape. So and that experience right there, I'm an audio engineer now. I mix records. I mix my own stuff. I do a lot of stuff in the TV and film world in audio. And now we have everything's visual, and you have these stems, and you're, I'm sitting there doing these crossfades or splicing, and I'm thinking back to splicing that stuff with a razor blade.
Putting that there, cut, tape, putting it back in the machine.
And I remember my solo record when I was 16, we graduated to ADATs. So this was digital recording with these super VHS tapes.
Those little...
And, these were big VHS tapes.
Not the little ones yet,
You mixed down to DAT, the little guys. But these were 8, you could fit 8 tracks on the super VHS. And then as we went, the engineer that owned the studio bought, you could daisy chain these machines together. And of course, they would always get out of sync, and things would go awry.
That's when I learned about the SMT, right? I mean, that was around that time. It was like, oh my God.
Time coding, all that stuff. But I would sit there being the drummer, and punching in was the thing, you couldn't, it was just, the computers have come such a long way. Back then, if you wanted to touch up, like, I need to hit that note differently, and we need to punch in on just that note or that measure.
Yep.
Being the drummer, the guy with good time, I was sitting there with the big remote control for the ADAT doing the punches and the punch outs, because there was no...
Imagine,
let's undo that and redo it. No, you had to do it right.
People nowadays don't know that the transports were this big, big as probably a sequencer or whatever, right?
What's the sequencer? And a Kai what?
And a Kai what? People know what those nice pads are. They never experienced the MC500 or the MC50.
The MPCs and all that stuff, yeah.
So now... all these gear, right? All these gear, you're the audio bug.
I'm learning the stuff,
bit you. You're the engineer that you were working with. Was he more of like a mentor kind of guy? Was he enthusiastic?
There was a few. That first record was a guy, Tom Rice, I believe was his name. I just was a fly on the wall. I looked like I wasn't paying attention, but I was checking everything out. The next guy, when I got to work with the ADATs, and I worked with Terry Kowalski for a long, I think I did 3 different recording projects with him over the course of a couple of years, and doing a solo album at 16. I wanted to play all the instruments. I got into singing. Yeah, I tracked everything. I had a guitar player come in and do some fancy solos.
Back up.
Why?
Drums, and now you're playing all the instruments. When did this come in? When did you learn how to play all the instruments?
I don't know. Just over the course of my teenage years, I picked up bass. I bought a bass.
Where'd you get all the money?
I worked.
Let's talk about that, because these kids are used to asking their parents for.
Yeah, well, that happened for a long period of time.
Yeah, but not the whole Neil Peart.
That first Tama kit that I got, because I wanted a Tama kit. I remember my dad saying, "Okay, well, you've got to place an ad to sell this kit that you have now,
the TK,
the TKO percussion." And I had a motorcycle. I had a Honda CR80 dirt bike that I would ride around. And he's
Jason
like,
Bonham.
It's like, motorcycle or drums?
Yeah.
You got to sell the motorcycle if you want this better kit. I'm like, damn. Okay, that's fine. I'll take the drum kit. So I had to sell a few things, and he taught me the value of like, this stuff's just not going to show up, man. Like when you ask for it,
nice.
you got to figure out how to make this. We'll add some money for you, but you got to understand the value of like, trading stuff up and trading stuff out.
So the Neil Peart kit, what kind of drum was that?
That was the Tama.
Okay, so it started with what kind of Tama did you get? The Rockstar?
It was the Rockstar. Yeah, of course. It was a Misty Chrome Tama Rockstar that I bought from the Dearborn Drum Shop.
Made in Japan.
Yeah,
they don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
sucks.
Well, our Tama's not doing
except for the Bubinga.
Okay, all right.
Everything else.
Because I know Yamaha moved over to China.
Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah. Later we'll talk. Later we'll talk Oxnard, but now we'll.
Yeah. Yes, we will.
Okay. The Tama kit.
The Tama kit was, it was 10, 12, 13, 14, 16 kick and snare, which is already a pretty
Standard.
big kit. And then I just added on from there. It was like every birthday, every Christmas, I asked for the chime tree, then I asked for the rototoms, then I asked for it. So it was a building process. And every time I learned a new Rush song or tried to learn a new Rush song, I'm like, well, what's he using there? What the hell is that thing? And I didn't have the tubular bells. Like that's a huge monstrosity of a, orchestral instrument that costs thousands of dollars. So I had to settle, for not having that.
I'm sorry, you threw me off. Did you just throw a different accent at me?
Did my Midwestern accent come out? It comes out every now and then. I get called out on that every now and then. I don't hear it, but somebody is like, people call me out on that. I still have no idea what the hell did I say that was so Midwestern. But.
Okay, so caught you there. Huh?
I don't mind. I know my roots.
Me too. That's why I don't like this. It was such a fake. My accent's thicker than this, by the way. So the parts for the Tama drums came from birthdays, Christmas.
A long time to build all that.
Patience
stuff
is a virtue, huh?
Yeah. And I still don't know patience very well.
So
I've gotten better at it.
When did the work part come into play? When did you have to work to buy stuff?
In high school, I wanted to record my records and have that experience. So I got a job. I was working the cash register at McDonald's.
Nice.
Working a lot of early mornings on the weekends and probably 3 days, 2 days during the week. As many hours as you were allowed to as a 16-year-old kid.
Your parents were proud of you for doing that?
Parents were probably pretty pleased with my work ethic that they instilled in me. And, they did, hand the keys to the car over when I turned 16. My sister got it was the hand-me-down cars. It just worked out to where like, okay, you get the Cutlass Supreme is yours. It's like, yes. Big car, man. Big car.
For the drums.
I don't know if I used that car ever for that drum kit. I was always getting picked up with vans and stuff. So anyway. And I remember taking that gig that I had at this club. I played the IROC on Harper Avenue, rough neighborhood in downtown Detroit. And I took the whole Neil Peart kit, man. It's like, wow, this is what I play, man.
Wow, set it up.
Oh my God. I had so many drums on that riser.
Oh my God.
And the sound guy comes up and he looks at me. He's like, are you kidding me? I'm like, yeah, mic him up. I walked away, like what a little shit, like what is this? Who does this kid think he is? I'm like, well, that's your job, right? You're here to mic up my drum kit. Oh man, terrible. But he did, and
wow. 3 mics, 2 overheads.
He mic'd up a lot of drums, man. Hats off to that guy. I don't remember his name. I'm usually good with remembering names, but he didn't give me too much grief. He just mic'd them all up. I had 2 snares and it's just a lot of stuff for a 16-year-old, 14-year-old kid, I think at the time, to bring in. But anyway, I worked and I spent my money on gas for my car and studio time. And I learned the craft of recording. So you produced
your album.
I did. And it's cringeworthy now. Like I can listen back and be like, wow, what an ambitious little crap.
Why not, right?
But it was just it was a great learning experience and ambitious as it was exactly that. It was a really great learning experience. And I still remember those ADATs. And then I remember this whole like, oh, everything's moving to computer. And I'm like, well, how does that work?
Oh,
You know?
so you never resisted. You were more the inquisitive
No,
type.
I was fine with it. I mean, I got into, so I was working a lot in a lot of bands around town, the suburbs. I was making some decent money. There was a little stint there where I moved to the Virgin Islands and raised hell down there. And then I flew back up and that was an interesting 6 months, but that's a different show.
Okay.
That's a different conversation.
Different episode for that one. We'll bring Mark back.
I'll come back and we'll just specifically talk about those 6 months. But yeah, I came back and I came back in December of that year. That was probably 1997 or 8, something like that. And I had already, I recorded a lot of records with, a band that I was in with some friends. We were playing, the college circuit was a thing.
Wait, you came back. You came back to Michigan.
I did come back to Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah. And, prior to that, I was in this college rock band, and we put out 2 records. And we were playing, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Ypsilanti, Michigan, the college towns.
Yeah.
Toledo was an easy market for us because the town that I lived in was exactly a half an hour from Toledo, a half an hour from Detroit, and a half an hour from Ann Arbor. So we would just keep on hitting that triangle.
Yeah, what's that Canadian...
Windsor.
I played Windsor.
We would frequent Windsor, not to play.
I know.
But the drinking age was a little younger.
Yeah.
So we would frequent. And the cool thing about that was there was a lot of cool... we would go to these blues bars and see these really tasty blues bands playing. And I don't market myself as a blues guy, even though one of my primary...
yes.
my primary artists that I work with is very much so a blues guy. But I respect good music, whatever genre it is. And we would go to, I think it was called New Chicago Blues Bar and Aardvarks. We used to go there.
In Canada.
Yeah. And Don Cherries to watch the hockey games and drink ourselves.
It was so weird. It was so weird because we had a show in Toronto, drove to Windsor, and I was looking at our itinerary. I was like, these producers suck. So they flew us to Canada, but they want us to take the bus to the States?
Crossing the border is no joke, too, when you have gear and it's a problem.
But it's so weird because Windsor
Windsor
and Detroit are like 10 minutes away?
Yeah, they're right on the same Detroit River.
Yeah, it's like
you can see Windsor from Detroit.
It's like Glendale and Burbank.
Yeah.
Kind of, right?
Yeah. It's right there. I mean, anytime you see Detroit pictured, they're taking that picture from the other side of the Detroit River.
Okay, so you did that.
I did that. I did the records with this band called the Lindemans, and we were the rage, all the rage for the young ladies of freshmen.
You were having fun.
I was having a good time. I was being exposed to all the things that go along with being in a cool band.
Yes, the perks.
We thought we were cool, and those records crack me up. I pop in that stuff every now and then.
So while you were here, was LA on the horizon? No.
I was always intrigued with LA, but I think I was still probably in that phase of just being a little afraid of the big city. I felt like it would chew me up pretty good. I was still very timid. I spent all I was in a really, I played in a country band.
Wow.
In the 90s, we had this big push of what we called young country, I think it was dubbed as, like Shania Twain.
Shania Twain.
It was rock and roll with a fiddle.
Yeah, Jars of Clay. Oh, around that time. Yeah, I know.
So I was playing that kind of stuff in bars, and I ended up landing... I answered an ad in the Metro Times, which is like the the rag, the cool indie,
like the LA Weekly.
Yeah, exactly. When those things were thick, that was the way you found information and who was playing where. And I answered. I got fed up playing country music. I did it for a year, and I referred to it as that time. And I answered an ad. I don't remember what the ad said, but it was cool. I think I was answering every ad, to be honest. There was like musicians wanted for all these different bands, and that was cool. Like I don't know how people get gigs. I still don't know how to get gigs, but I just accidentally land in gigs, and I'm very happy about it when it happens. But back then, I was answering these ads, and I landed this. I don't know. They came to see me at one of my gigs. And they were a band that was doing some pretty interesting stuff sonically, and like it was a totally different. And it was really intriguing to me because it melded really aggressive rock with synthesizers. Ooh. And I'm like, I had heard of Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah.
Being the late '90s, but I didn't have any of the records. But they sent me some of their stuff, and I talked to the guys on the phone. I'm like, this is really interesting stuff. I have no idea what I would contribute to this with a drum kit. But I also found this band called Garbage that I was really, really into because it was exactly what I needed Manson? At the time. Shirley was hot. Shirley. Yeah. Shirley was everything that you wanted in an alternative female artist.
People were like, "Are you there for Butch Vig?" Who?
Well, see, Butch was, Shirley drew me in.
Yes.
But then I started figuring out who Butch was.
Yes.
And Butch is still one of my
genius.
To work with a guy like that because he cares about drum sound.
Very
much. And he gets a drum sound like no other in the studio.
Were you able to read his Modern Drummer interview?
I don't recall. I've been getting my monthly subscription to that magazine since the mid to late 80s, and I haven't missed one. So I'm sure I read it, but when was that?
Yeah, it was one of those major when Garbage was coming out, and
95 or 96 was
talked about Nirvana, and then he talked about what he did to his drum kit, where they wanted all electronics, but he wanted an acoustic-looking drum kit, and this was before. This was before the time of mesh.
Yeah.
He would put he would put styro peanuts inside the toms just to deaden sound.
I must have missed that article.
So it sounded like these drums behind us.
Yeah,
but they were actual skins,
shells,
skins, and triggered, and that's what they did. And I was like, wow.
He did some really great work. And I went into the 90s kicking and screaming because I was coming of age in the late 80s, early 90s. I was just getting into high school, and I still wanted everything that I knew of the 80s to continue into the 90s because now I'm like able to go to these parties and these clubs and stuff. And lo and behold, Nirvana comes and ruins everything as far as I felt at the moment. I didn't understand what this wave of Seattle bands, and I didn't appreciate it like I did later. It took me till, probably 97, 98 to appreciate what was going on musically.
But you know what? It's so like when I think of now I was able to tie it in when Stuart Copeland was being interviewed. He would say that during their punk scene, him, Andy Summers, and Sting, they were already good, but they had to dumb down their performances to fit in the punk scene.
Sure.
And then the New Romantics came out after them, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the whole grunge thing is another way of the Seattle explosion is more of like an expression of how these musicians, instead of playing articulated rhythms and...
Well, that's an interesting take on it. I looked at it as the backlash to... by 88, things were pretty homogenized and nasty. Let's be honest. I mean, it was everything was a little bit too much at that point. The hair was a little too big. The drum sounds were a little too reverbed out.
Yes.
Things got a little ridiculous. Like everything, it runs its course.
Like Nile Rodgers.
Don't you say anything bad about Nile.
I'm not. Like I love that. I love him as a producer and as an artist. But, everybody wanted to sound like Nile.
And Nile was always tasty, though. Like, he never got out of control with stuff.
No.
God, the records that he produced. He was
Bowie,
such
Duran,
the it guy.
Yeah, Chick.
Steve Winwood. Diana Ross, Madonna's Like a Virgin album.
Yes.
He had a run there from let's call it, chic, even moving outside of Chic, what he did with that. But when he started producing, you know, the late 70s, very late 70s to like 86, he owned everything. His name was on everything that was in the top 40.
Disco, it was. And then R&B, you had Quincy Jones, and then you had him, and the disco, whatever.
If you wanted a hit, you had to get Nile.
I saw him. I saw him in Duran Duran.
Yeah?
Yeah, in
I saw him
San Diego.
Okay, so I saw him when they played the Hollywood Bowl a few years
This was
back.
post-cancer.
Because he produced at least a song or two on
the new Duran,
either the Paper Gods record.
Yeah, Paper Gods.
Okay,
Paper Gods.
So he sat in and played, and I think Chic opened the show.
Yes,
at the Hollywood Bowl.
Same
so
thing.
I was at that.
No Nick Rhodes, right?
No, Nick was there. I didn't miss. Yeah, Nick had to take some time off to do a family thing.
Yes, I got.
So I got the show without Nick. Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
I know. I got to watch it again.
Yeah,
with Nick.
But I saw the Hollywood Bowl show and a show in San Diego. But either way,
lucky you.
And I got to sit in. Niall did a at the Grammy Museum. He did a talk.
Yeah.
And just being in the same room, like I don't get too starstruck or giddy.
What did you take out?
Oh my God! Well, I mean, he's got he's got a little bit of an ego, and rightfully so. He is
Nile
He's
Rodgers.
the hit maker, baby. So there was a bit of a stroke fest about here's what I did, and I'm awesome.
Did he talk about?
Yes, you are. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly.
Did he talk about the whole David Bowie Let's Dance?
Absolutely.
Like from that guitar part, David.
He talked about the guitar part and how he put the effect on it and made it the thing, and then he talked about the Notorious album that he produced with Duran. And thinking that he was going to be with Duran. He wanted to be like the extra member of Duran
because they got Steve Ferroni.
Steve's my top 5.
Right?
Yeah. My first concert experience, my first big concert was 1986. And I was part devastated because Roger was gone. Yeah. Andy was gone.
Yes.
But these two new cats, Warren Cucurullo and Steve Ferroni, I was like, whoa. These guys are players.
Yes.
Like Duran, played their instruments well, but these guys were a different caliber.
It was
Warren was from
Missing Persons.
Missing Persons, but prior to that, he's a Zappa guy.
Yes. And
Ferroni was, Average White Band, Eric Clapton, some tasty gigs that he had, and that Notorious record was
so
funky.
funky. Yeah, I was gonna say
the horns and that was a good record. But yeah, seeing Niall in person and listening to his stories, I think it was like an hour and a half thing. That was a pretty cool experience. And that's one of the that's why I can't leave LA. Like I have a love-hate relationship with this town.
Me too.
And those, there's a lot of perks because you can run into your people that you know, that are very cool to run into.
Yes.
Or you can do Grammy Museum things like listen to Nile Rodgers talk about his career and what he did, his contribution to pop music. And
let's go back. You haven't left Michigan.
Okay. Yes. Oh, so I landed this cool gig in this band called Sweaty Suede Lips.
Oh, not country.
Say it fast.
Sweaty
Suede Lips. We were very clever. We put it all as one word.
Sweaty Suede Lips. Okay.
And they were doing a thing that was very influenced by Trent Reznor and Butch Vig.
Can we say like MGMT kind of thing, industrial?
I like MGMT, but this was they listened to Teenage Riot and like some really dark wave electronic stuff that they were introducing me to stuff that was really whack. Like this stuff was like really aggressive electronic music
in minor.
Yeah, of course. There was a major key to be found in any of that stuff. And there's like white noise being triggered on. Like just really, to me, it was like, wow, this is very, very cool.
So now white noise changes. So you are
you
doing
can integrate the electronics, and being that I had already discovered Garbage, and Garbage to them in this camp was like, oh yeah, they're cool,
right?
But here's this record. Marilyn Manson was a big thing at that point. 9 Inch Nails was huge, brought industrial music to the forefront.
Yes. So you became the drummer of Sweaty Suede Lips.
Sweaty Suede Lips, yes. And we did really, really well. We owned Detroit. And Detroit had a really, really cool music scene at that point. This was 98 to 2003 we were together.
Wow.
And this was, a lot of cool bands were happening in Detroit. A lot of cool bands were becoming successful out of Detroit. You had the garage rock scene happening. Jack White was on fire with White Stripes. Well, Kid Rock, Eminem. I mean, you had a lot of different stuff happening.
Yes.
Which, we had our time in the 60s with Motown. We had a little, there was some 80s hair metal bands coming out of Detroit. That eventually relocated to LA because that's where everything was happening. But then the late 90s, early 2000s, you had this garage rock thing. You had whatever the hell Kid Rock was doing. You had Eminem doing the hip hop thing. And there were a lot of great bands to put together bills. Up until that point, it was like if you were the king of Detroit in terms of you had draw.
Yeah.
The thing to do was, okay, you need to put together a bill for this venue. You'd put two crappy bands on the bill to make yourself look better. Well, we kind of changed that. We went into this, this Detroit music scene with a different attitude of like, let's put together. We were in a position where we had draw. We were bringing them in. We had an amazing show. I finally learned how to dress. This band taught me a lot from everything from, okay, now we're using computers to record.
Yes.
I started, looking over the shoulders of the two guys that were, the core, the John and Paul of that band.
Of the band.
There's always those guys. And I was paying close attention to, we were using samplers and all. It was very technologically advanced, this band.
You were enjoying this.
I was enjoying this, yes.
Plus, your recording experience taught you to actually just, the click is there and it's part of the show.
And the live show was very, like, I had to get in your monitors for the first time because the click.
Who were firing the samples? You or
it was very interesting at the beginning. I remember I think we were running backing tracks off of a DA-78, a Tascam DA-78, and it only had 2 outs.
Yes.
And they were very adamant about stereo mixes out front. So I didn't get a click for the first 2 damn years of that band. I was listening to the loops. And just, and there'd be like dead silent.
And you better make sure that you land back on.
Man, so there was a lot of me sitting in my, home studio, whatever it was, my practice space, playing along with, my laptop, and I would have, because the metronome keeps going, I would program a certain amount of bars and randomly have measures where they'd cut out for a measure, 2 measures, and it'd be random, and I'd play just the groove, and the click would drop out, and I'd keep going. And then if I landed back on the one, goal, that was it. So that's how I trained myself for that. And then eventually we got, maybe the DA-78 was later, and that had multiple outputs. It had like 8 outputs where you could assign clicks. I don't remember exactly. I don't remember running the backing tracks off of like mini discs and weird,
Mini disc, that was a thing.
That was terrible. Maybe that's what it was at first, and then we graduated to the DA-78. That sounds right, because that had multiple outs. And I finally got a click track for the last like year and a half that the band was together. And there was a lot of technology. We had a light guy that would come in and do like. We looked like a signed band, and everybody kind of thought that we were going to be the next thing out of Detroit.
So what happened?
Oh man, bands are hard. Bands are hard to keep together.
Why?
Well, bands that are
manufactured.
Well, bands that are trying that have ambitious goals, and whenever you put, whether it's 3 or 5 or however many creatives in a room, it's not always fun, and it's not always easy. The personalities and all that stuff. It's you have the strong-minded people that are running the show, whether there's 1 or 2, there's usually it's limited to 1 or 2. And, your ego gets a little damaged, and you're, like, that's why I'm having such, like, nobody's ever asked me to talk. I'm like, I was driving here. I'm like, what the hell am I going to talk about for an hour?
Imagine we've been talking for more than an hour.
And this is great because I have like a lot of decades worth of stuff to talk about. I'm used to doing interviews with bands. We've done a fair share of radio interviews over the course of decades, and I'm usually the quiet one. And maybe get my moment to say a few things, but no, so this is a rare but fun experience.
This is first of many, I'd like to believe, because having you on the program, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to tune in, reach out to you.
I hope that what I'm saying is interesting, because everybody's got a story, if you...
Very interesting. And it's very inspiring, by the way. Very informative and very inspiring. So
Good.
I'm just inspired right now.
I'm glad to hear it.
Okay, so why did you guys break up?
We hit the ground running so hard. I always say that if you can keep your band together after the 3 to 4 year mark, you're in good shape, because that's usually when things get a little...
It's a marriage.
Dicey. It really is. And it's not a marriage between two people. It's like 4.
Orgy.
5, whatever. Orgy. And somebody's touching you the wrong way in this orgy. Somebody, the safe word didn't get,
Paradiddle.
Paradiddle. It's supposed to stop. And they don't stop. They keep on forcing
going.
their way into areas that you don't want. But yeah, I mean, it got to the point, we put out material. That band had every entity that is necessary. We had a great look. We had our own photographer that took amazing photographs of the band. We had a great image.
Right.
Everybody was dressed proper, for this gig. And the recordings were amazing. For the time, and the live show was just off the hook. Like I said, we had amazing light show, and it was just, I learned the whole package,
the production value,
and how much work and effort it took to put something like that together. But what happens is, if you don't get to where you want to be in a certain amount of time, there's burnout. You burn out. The energy, you can only sustain that sort of grind. We're hitting all the radio stations. We're doing X, Y, and Z. People are overlooking us because they thought we were already signed, because we made everything look so good.
Did you have a manager at this time?
We were working with a guy, that was trying to get us to the next level. Was he a proper man? I don't know how these bands find managers. If they find their manager before they get to the ultimate goal and get assigned a manager, or you look at some of these classic bands, these legacy bands, and these managers started out with them day one. Rush. Terry Brown was their producer for a long time from the beginning, but Ray Daniels, I think it was Ray Daniels.
Not familiar.
The manager from he was booking them in high school gyms. That's in 1972.
Paul Guinness with U2.
Exactly. Those legacy managers just saw something in that band. They wanted to be a part of it.
Invested in them from the get-go.
Exactly.
Our manager, Tommy Tanchanko, started with us as we were starting the band. And Intro Voice, my band, is 32 years old already.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We're still around. And I know, right?
All that good, clean living, right? You look great.
So, I mean, he was there from the beginning. First, he was the guy carrying the equipment. And then we were able to find another guy, Pancho Gonzalez, to do that for us. And then he was able to find a bunch of roadies to do that for us.
It's your buddies, man. Yeah. It's people that see something. They want to be a part of it. Everybody likes to be around the band. And when they see it gaining momentum, they want to be a part of the, it's cool to be. We had that. I had that with my band, in high school when we were playing clubs, or when I graduated high school and was able to play, college bars and stuff like that.
Now, so this band,
Sweaty Suede Lips.
Sweaty Suede Lips. Sweaty Suede Lips. Mm-hmm. Being more of a passive member of the band, were you keeping your fingers crossed? Please don't break up. Please don't break up.
I didn't even think about it, because I was having such a blast, but I was still very quiet.
Right.
I was the quiet guy.
Yes.
I meet people that in Detroit now that remember that band, and they're like, "You were the guy that you didn't say anything. You just played drums awesome, but you were just so quiet." And I'm like, I was just scared to death to talk to anybody. I didn't feel like I had anything to offer socially, so I was just like, I don't know what to say.
But was there an exit? Was there an exit strategy for you at this point? No,
there was no exit strategy, because
you were all in.
We were just so on our way, and we were doing so well. And then it kind of ran out of gas in a lot of different facets. The core songwriter You know, even if you ask him to this day, he knows what he did wrong. Ego gets the best of some people.
That's true.
And you're like, you know, I don't need these guys. You know, there was a little bit of that. There was a lull in the writing process. We didn't have new material. We were playing the same old show for a long time. We introduced a couple new things. And, you know, and quite honestly, because of that, the crowd starts to dwindle a little bit. Yes. And you've got, like I said earlier, to maintain that level. And we had a high standard. We set a standard.
And and that standard's probably intense, right?
Very intense. Yeah. And there's a lot of work.
Right. Set up, tear down.
Yeah.
And you had a crew? You had a crew?
Oh, man. We didn't have... I mean, we had a few people
So that meant that you guys were actually setting up and tearing down.
Oh, dude, yeah. I mean, our lighting guy, he was a separate company, so he would come and do his thing. We had a great sound engineer that was, you know, working a lot of the clubs, but like once we established that guy runs our sound great, we're hiring him to do all of our appearances. So we got that guy. But I'm like, you know... I'm schlepping my gear and I still hate doing that. Like my idea of success over the years has, like, we talked about, like, oh, I want to be Duran Duran. I want to have that sort of fame. To I just want somebody to set up and tear down my shit, man. Like that's the idea of success to me now. Is like I don't care about fame and fortune. I just want somebody to set up my stuff and tear it down.
And how old were you? Were you 18, 19? How old were you?
In that band, I was in my 20s. I was like the 24 mark, which was like...
You were old.
Well, some people's standards, yeah. But yeah, it was again, every experience in this sort of thing is a learning experience.
Of course. So you woke up and... Sweaty suede lips.
I got an email.
Wow.
Saying that your equipment is on the front lawn. Come pick it up.
Are you serious?
We talked him out of dissolving the band once, and I think we played one more show, not knowing it was our last show. And then I think it was weeks later where we got that email.
Were you guys friends apart from the band?
We got pretty close.
Like you guys hung out and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we were the type of band. We would go out to different venues and different events in Detroit, and the Metro Times would write about, like, Sweaty Suede Lips guys were in attendance at we were like the cool kids in town and setting that bar. And when you have a band that sets a bar in a scene, like sets that standard, it brings everybody up, and they're like, oh, we've got to put on, you know, this.
They have to catch up.
The shows were really good. We had great people on the bill that were in the opening slot, the special guest slot, like the whole night. So people wanted to come to those shows, and it fizzled, and there was a lot of just things that I remember when we broke up. And this has nothing, maybe, you know, I'm not saying it has anything to do with us breaking up, but the Metro Times had listed all the bands that month that had broken up. The whole scene was done in one foul swoop. It was just over.
And this was when?
This is 2003.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just like, to get that taste of you know,
Stardom.
Local and regional success and seeing what it takes to do that. Part of me was like, it was tough to deal with,
of course.
But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, I'll just do it again with somebody else.
Really, that was nice.
That sort of like all those entities working together like they did is not easy. The stars really need to line up for something to.
Remember,
to work like
you saw them from was that Metro? What magazine?
The Metro Times.
The Metro Times, right? You found them, or they found you. 3.5 years. Then you get an email.
That was the worst way to. It may have well have been a fax, you know. Like
no goodbyes.
No.
And then what happened?
Okay, so there were two guys that were like the John and Paul of that operation. Well, I started, and that's where I met Ken Roberts, which is who I work with in the Josie Pace project. Right. Who is my current one of my current artists that I play for, and Ken and I have been.
Hold on, you met Ken in Michigan.
I met Ken in Michigan, and he's still in Michigan. Josie's based out of Michigan. She's a Detroit artist, and I was in Sweaty Suede Lips with Ken Roberts. And you know, he was a guy that you know, before that band even, he was signed to Warner Brothers or Mercury.
Okay.
He had a couple record deals. He toured. He was, you know, had a video on regular rotation on MTV. He got a taste of that.
Oh, so, yeah.
And so he already knew that the music industry is, I mean, he made no money off that. And it was just like constant touring. You know, they did the whole tour bus thing and had the MTV thing. And, you know, and you know, there was like 18 million people in that band too. So you chop up all
my
the, you know,
God, yeah.
it was silly. But either way, you know, he had that experience and brought that to the table in Sweaty Sweet Lips. We did really well. It ended. Ken and I kept on working together. We had a studio project, if you will. We never played a live show, but we put out a record under the name Cleanse, and it was completely different. We tapped into our, and this is something that the kids should know too. And I don't think that this happens enough in today's music fan. They don't go backwards.
Yeah.
If they find an artist that they like, and maybe I'm generalizing, maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. I'm old. I have no idea what the hell is going on these days. But what I do kind of feel happens is when I was a Duran Duran fan, or am a Duran Duran fan, in the 80s when I discovered Duran, and I took that, you know, all the records, loved all the records. Well, who were they listening to?
Exactly.
Who inspired them?
Exactly. Roxy
then
Music.
You find Roxy Music
Exactly,
and Brian
right?
Ferry. And then
You listen to that.
Then you listen to that and you're like, holy crap, there's a whole, you know, this
Yes,
guy, Brian
yes,
Ferry,
yes.
and his tuxes, and the guy walks on stage, first song, and
Right?
his bow tie is hanging like he just got back from a cocktail party, and he saunters on stage, and you're like, this guy's cool. I want to do that kind of stuff. And then you discover who David Sylvian is
Yes,
if you go back to Japan.
Yeah.
Thank you for knowing that, because there's not, you know, Japan.
Still life in mobile homes, baby.
Oh, man, I just got the tin drum vinyl and all the remastered, the high-speed vinyls that they're putting out now. Steve Jansen.
Drum talk, guys.
Yeah. Those records are great. Nobody knows who they are in the States, so I'm glad you do. But yeah, if you look at the Cleanse album and listen to that, is me and
like
Ken
that.
Roberts.
Okay.
You know, tapping into our David Sylvian, Brian Ferry soiree kind of, you know,
Like,
stuff.
you know, when I first listened to Japan, I was like, and again, coming from the arrangement of Duran Duran, you know where the chorus is or the bridge is, right? And then you go Japan. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's a different vibe, but you certainly can see where Nick Rhodes got his look.
Yes.
You know, they've got a song called Night Porter, and then Duran's got Night Boat, and then you have them, Gentlemen Take Polaroids, and Duran has Girls on Film. You know, everybody's influenced by somebody. Everybody borrows a little bit from somewhere, and I don't know if that goes on today. Like kids or music fans, younger generation music fans, I don't know if they're paying any sort of attention to who inspired the artists that they like. And it should happen more often because, you know, the stuff shouldn't be forgotten.
That's true. Because I remember telling my son when we were talking, because my son's a rap artist, and
and a very good one. I heard
thank you.
Stuff.
So I
interview.
He actually asked me, so Dad, this Killers, because he was into the Killers, and I go, that's like Duran Duran.
They're very influenced by Duran Duran.
Yeah, and then you listen to Brandon Flowers' interview, and he goes, "Yep, I'm a Nick Rhodes fan."
Yeah, big time.
Yeah,
I like that band. They're out of Vegas, aren't they?
They are out of Vegas. So at least those kind of bands have context, and I guess it's important. Kids nowadays, you're right. Kids nowadays should put context into the bands that they listen to and go to the source.
History, you know, Go back. Check that stuff out.
Go to the source.
And, you know, and I don't want this to turn into like, you know, a bitch fest about modern music in the last 20 years of trying to figure out what's what, you know.
Yeah.
Honestly, every decade had its stamp. Like if you look at 40s music, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, everything is like you can put it in a nice box. 90s had a lot of diversity, and you had the Beastie Boys, 9 Inch Nails, and Primus doing that. A lot of different stuff. It was a melting pot of great, interesting stuff. And then Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. The list of bands goes on. Right. And then we get to the new millennium, and I'm sitting there waiting for, okay, what's the new thing going to be?
K-pop.
20 years later, I'm still like, what's the new thing going to be?
K-pop.
I have no idea what's happening.
BTS.
Yeah.
No offense, guys.
Like I said, I don't want to turn it into like, and I'm trying to be as objective as possible. Like, am I turning into that old man that thinks that his era of music is the best? Or is some of this stuff pretty homogenized and with little substance?
But then again, you're still in Michigan.
At that point in the early 2000s, I was in Michigan writing David Sylvian wannabe songs with Ken Roberts.
So
with Cleanse, yes.
Okay.
And that's available on Spotify.
There you go. We'll put a link in the description. So
Yeah. And I mean, then it was around that time that I started playing with a phenomenal guitar player and singer by the name of Laith Al-Saadi.
Okay.
And he is a cat that's been around for, a very long time.
How'd you meet him?
He's out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I was, I was living in the next town over where Eastern Michigan campus is. And at that point, I had been, I was the store operations manager of a Guitar Center.
Nice.
Southfield, Michigan. And then I opened a store in Canton, Michigan, and ran that one for a lot of years.
So no Berkeley?
No Berkeley. I skipped out on Berkeley altogether, and I was very. I was kind of bummed about that for a long time. I was like, did I make the wrong decision there? And I was still gigging a lot, but I had the day job at Guitar Center, and
was that like being a candy store?
It was. Guitar Center was a very, very, very cool music store.
Right.
Big box music store, the first of its kind. They came to Michigan, and I mean, they started, the store started popping up, and it was just like, I've never seen so many instruments in one place. And then, I'm there buying drum heads one day, and I'm like, hey, you guys hiring? I had just gotten back from the Virgin Islands. I needed a job.
Oh, this one, yeah, okay.
So that goes back a little bit. We're bouncing around a little bit, but either way, I started a what would become an 8-year career as the store operations manager of Guitar Center. And the discount was amazing.
Of course, yeah, I heard.
Bone cost on everything. I built my studio. I built my recording outfit and my drum rig and everything from working there.
In the basement. Were you still living at home?
No, I moved out of the house. I think I was 20 or 21 when I moved out of the house. Look at
you. You got your own house or apartment?
I moved into a house with 4 of my buddies that were going to college. So I was living the college life without the classes. And I'd have my briefcase and I'd be walking into the door, after a long day running a multi-million-dollar Guitar Center, being the youngest store operations manager in the country. And, I'd walk in and they'd say, Dad's home. They'd make fun of me because I was the only one with the jobby job. And, that was a trip, man. It was 2 of my bandmates that I had for a long time and this other good friend of mine. We were just a core.
So you guys were tight. At least you were living with people you were close to.
Yeah. It was an interesting time. And,
So you set up the studio there.
I had the basement there and just started building up, my studio bounced around and eventually my studio, because I started living in a condo, that was too tight to keep any gear. So I'm like, Mom, Dad, can I put my studio in your basement again? They're like, yeah, come on down. This is the only time we'll see you. So sure. So I would drive down to my parents' place and have my studio in the basement. It's like anything that you can do to make music.
Are your parents still around?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah. They just had their 50th wedding anniversary like last year or a year before, and then still going strong.
Shout out.
Yeah, Mom and Dad. So they were nice enough to let me continue to bang on drums in their basement in my 20s. I started, playing with Laith. I met him because my roommates, my college roommates were bartenders and wait staff at this, this restaurant, which then had a martini lounge in the basement or the downstairs bar. And they kept saying, you got to come down and check out this cat that just can wail on guitar.
So Laith would play by himself? Or
he had a band.
He had a band.
He had a trio.
Okay.
And he was playing everything from covers, and he had a record out. He was, opposite end of the spectrum. I mean, I went from Sweaty Suede Lips playing like highly technical, stuff, following a click,
right,
to dabbling on this Cleanse studio project and doing that thing. To I needed a gig. I needed to play out again. Even though I had the day job, I was,
of course,
I was doing the day job, but I was just like, I can't do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
this sucks.
yeah.
And I, meeting Laith and seeing him play, I remember coming down to that club, and Goodnight Gracie was a club, Martini Lounge, not that much bigger than the room that we're in, like maybe twice the size.
Okay.
But it was a tight, probably could cram 70 people in there. It was small, but it was on U of M campus, University of Michigan, big campus, and it was the spot. And he had a residency there every Wednesday, Thursday. He'd be playing, and he played there for a few years at this point. And I came down and checked him out, and it's Martini Lounge, so
right. Of course.
Got my martini.
Of course.
And I'm sipping my drink, and I had a couple martinis, and then finally, he goes on break. And the bar manager that I knew real well, that was telling me to come down and check this guy out, introduced me. He's like, "This is Laith, and this is Mark, and one thing leads to another." And I, you want to come up and sit in? I've been hearing about your drumming from all these guys.
So he made you jam.
So I'm like, oh, a couple martinis, and I don't know if I'm going to be at my best, but sure, why not? And
never say no.
Never say no. Unless you're really,
of course.
In no condition. But I was fine. I was good enough to get up there and play. And the first song that we played, he turns around and asks me, "What do you want to play?" I'm like, I hate this question. I don't know. He's very roots rock oriented. He was playing a lot of, Long Train Running, or a lot of Allman Brothers and the band, and some R&B stuff, and had a good Motown catalog happening. So I'm like, I don't know, just pick something. I'll go with it. He's like, well, who do you like drumming wise? Like, what name a drummer that you like? I'm like, the first guy I tend to mention, because Neil's the obvious choice, but I'm not going to, sit down at this 4-piece Ringo kit and say, I like Neil Peart.
Exactly.
But I was like, Manu Katché is one of my faves.
Ooh.
I'm a huge Peter Gabriel fan. And Manu Katché played on So, and he played, it's just very tasty drumming. This French cat, that's just playing all these, splash cymbal bits. And I'm like, I like that guy. What do you know from Peter Gabriel? And like, is he really going to pull out a Peter Gabriel song? Well, we did. We played In Your Eyes, and we crushed it. And I don't know if it was the first time he played it, but it was certainly the first time I played it in a bar or club, thing.
Oh, nice.
And we may have played one or two more together, and I went back to my seat, back to my martini, and he came back up and said, "Do you want to play Wednesday nights from here on out?" Because my other drummer, Jeff Trudell, who's an amazing drummer and plays with a lot of big names, he goes out on the road, and there's an open spot on just Wednesday nights out of the 2 nights. So I started doing, I think I started doing Thursday nights, come to think of it. Doesn't matter. Either way, I was playing once a week with Laith Al-Saadi at Goodnight Gracie's, and we proceeded to play there for like 8 years.
Wow.
And that's when you really hone your craft, man, as a live band. That's just like, there was never any set lists.
Wow.
There was never any
So
prep.
it's fun.
It was rough at first.
Really?
I'll be totally
Okay.
honest. Laith had a reputation for going through a lot of drummers. He was very, very tough on his drummers. And, I'm not going to say anything bad about that, even though I was on the raw end of some on stage, like, ass reamings, for lack of a better term. It's like, wow, this guy's crushing me right now, just screaming at me on stage,
like Ray Charles, kinda.
Oh man, did Ray do that?
Yeah, watch my foot.
Oh, yeah. Headstock, watch my, and just like, whiplash.
Yes.
Not my tempo.
Yeah.
Not my tempo. I'm like, he did everything but throw a cymbal at my head.